Okay, one more video that people have been wanting to see from me soon. Star Wars. First I want to say though, people keep asking me when I'm going to get back to the DBZ plot. Pretty soon. No, just got a lot of stuff on my plate right now. I barely managed to get this done. I've got a big move coming up. Moving out of state actually. So, yeah. But anyways, Star Wars, yes. Look, I gotta be perfectly honest. People keep asking me what did I think of the prequel movies. Did I think they were good? Did I think they were bad? I know that there are people who are huge fans of them. I know there are people who think they're abominations created by Satan himself. Which sometimes it can seem like George Lucas isn't too far from. But, no, just kidding. But, I gotta be perfectly honest. I don't think they're horrible. I just don't think they're up to snuff. I don't think they're on par with the others where they should be. They're flashier, they're prettier to look at, sure, but they don't have the same drive, the same appeal. See, what makes the old ones, the old Star Wars movies, so appealing is the fact that, the characters and, the way they interact with each other and the plot line. It's very plot driven. That was one advantage to some of the older movies, is they had to be more plot driven than effects driven or visuals driven. That's not to say that they weren't very visual films for their time. It's just that, especially in light of today, you see the plot a lot more than you used to, and it was good. A lot of people have complained that the lightsaber fights are underwhelming, but you know what, guys, give me a break. They did what they could back then. A lot of the flips that they have now are done with wire harnesses and computer alterations that they didn't have back then. The first fight in the first original film, I know a lot of people said was horrible, and it wasn't that great. But at the same time, guys, they had to try to track these little sticks with lights, flashing lights, on them as lights, and digitally insert the glow around them to create the lightsabers, and it was very difficult. In fact, until they went back and fixed it in the special edition, there was one point during the fight where you actually see Obi-Wan's lightsaber go completely out. I mean, literally, it just flashes off almost completely. So, what happens then is, it looks funky, and that was just doing simple stuff like that. Star Wars, the first one, actually wasn't made with that big of a budget, hard as that is to believe. Now, what happens then is you get into the arguments about whether or not CG is overdone. No, we're not going there. It's very difficult to pull off something on the scale of Star Wars nowadays without CG or a ton of work, and there's all kinds of new regulations and laws regarding what you can and can't do with actors, and so on and so forth. Liability lawsuits and everything. So we're going to ignore that for now. We're not going there. We are, however, going to talk about what I think did go wrong with the first movies. Or the, first three, the prequels. There. We'll just leave it at that. Yeah, chronology can be confusing sometimes. Here's the basic rundown. The biggest things that I think were wrong with the prequels were, for one thing, dialogue. When you have Anakin and Padme sitting there talking to each other about how much, I love the water, and, how I hate the sand, and it's okay, it frankly didn't really mean too much. It was kind of vapid. It didn't really interest you at all. In fact, every time I rewatched the movie, I find myself more often than not skipping the scenes of those guys interacting on Naboo in episode 2. But it's a lot of dialogue. It's, just kind of clunky. If it's not part of a major plot point, or a major revelation or something, then, they didn't seem to spend too much time on it. Which is an easy trap to fall into, but it's something you need to avoid. Another thing, the biggest, oh man, I'm going to say the biggest for last though, but another thing, I really think they could have done a lot more with Darth Maul. I think he was a good character. I think he had a lot of potential. There was a lot of mystery around him. He looked freaky. Um, I think it actually might have even been better if Obi-Wan didn't get to fight him yet. Might have even been better if he had just left Obi-Wan there after he killed his master and took off. I really do think it could have been better that way. Have Count Dooku less, fighting and more. See, that's another thing with Count Dooku. Is, after establishing you have these Jedi who can flip and, rip things right off the wall and fling, he was very limited in terms of what the other Jedi could do. You'd think that them being much more acrobatic could have easily taken him. So I know they tried to compensate with Force power, but I mean, for crying out loud, come on. You had Anakin and Obi-Wan, just fighting him on his terms, basically. And the only one who actually gave him a challenge like that was Yoda. And granted, Yoda's a lot more agile than those two are. He's, a better swordsman, I suppose. But, it got, it got kind of ridiculous. Not the Yoda thing. The Yoda thing was cool, and it was frankly believable. You knew something had to be up with Yoda for him to be considered to be so powerful, even though he seems fairly decrepit. But, I mean, seriously, when you got these two guys, instead of doing what they could be doing and flipping around, fighting around, using their agility to their advantage, they're fighting him, on his terms, which was incredibly... Now, had you included Darth Maul, you could have used the full potential there. Would have been a much more interesting fight, but truth be told, sometimes the flashier fights aren't always good. I did kind of like the Darth Maul fight because there weren't quite so many flips on everything. He did do some, but it was mostly actually part of moves. They weren't pointless. They weren't just flashy for show. He was fighting two people at once. I thought that was good. Also would have been more believable for taking on Dooku. It would have been better if they had both been able to fight him. But, if the double-ended lightsaber, someone skilled and learning how to fight two people at once would have been, interesting. Plus, there's the whole dynamic of him having killed his master, and it would have been believable because Obi-Wan's mind would have been kept off of Anakin. And here's why. He's watching Anakin this whole time right in front of him, and Anakin is displaying all these warning signs, okay? Anakin is displaying signs that he's, got rage issues, that he's, got all these problems with him, all this stuff's going on right in front of Obi-Wan's face. And he just seems oblivious to what the audience can so plainly see. And, it's kind of stupid in that sense. But furthermore, we're going to touch on Anakin and what was wrong with him. First of all, Hayden Christensen, no. Never should have been Anakin Skywalker. His delivery, his attitude, his personification, it was just so over the top. When he's not trying to be emotive, he's just, flat and dull. But then, when he's angry, he's angry. You know what I mean? It's like the only emotion he can properly convey half the time is anger. Everyone else has to act to kind of make up for him. And, I see big problems with that. I see that as definitely a downside. It made Anakin seem much more corny and unlikable. Now, what would have been much more interesting, I think, is Anakin... Well, look at the way he was described, in the old movies. He was a very skilled pilot. He was very strong, very powerful. But he was also kind of out there, He never really had his mind on, where he was, what he was doing. He was more, he just had his mind on other things all the time. He was kind of distant sometimes, detached. All this stuff that seemed to happen was bubbling under the surface, which is why when it finally happened, people were shocked. When it happens in the movies, let alone the fact that, he's going to turn into Vader, but there's no shock factor involved. If you could have given the audience a shock factor, because I've seen movies, okay, where the guy's going to turn into a villain, but you don't know how. You know, it's like, how is this guy possibly going to turn bad? How is he possibly going to be evil? You know, look at him. He's the, you know, but then, you know, it happens. And when you think about it, everything that's led up to it, there have been clues, but they've just been subtle. You know, it would have been much more of a more satisfying reveal if it happened that way. You know what I mean? I just think that there was so much more that could have been done with Anakin, so much better. To, even though, I mean, you know it's coming, but, you know, at least make it satisfying when it happens. Just so much there. Those are my chief complaints about him. I don't really have too many others except for the whole Fett thing. That I think is kind of weird. You know, the clone troopers all being cloned from one guy. I guess someone in the expanded universe tried to explain it as, you know, that was their initial project, and then they started noticing that, you know, they started taking in also non-clone recruits and finding people who were, you know, instead of just, you know, one general guy, people who were exceptional at ground combat, exceptional pilots, exceptional this or that, and started cloning them, you know, so that they'd have ace pilot, and not just good all-around soldiers, but aces in whatever field they were assigned to. But, you know, the whole cloning from one person thing, I don't know. But, you know, that's my general opinion on the movies. I think that they could have been a lot better. I don't think they're horrible abominations. I do think they kind of tell a necessary part of the story, but I think they could have been told a lot better. You know? A lot less emotive and a lot... See, I've read some of the books that are supposed to take place between the movies and the prequels. Between the prequel movies. And they actually portray Anakin a lot better in the books, I think, than they do in the movies. Because I know a lot of people had said that it seemed like the Anakin in the books was different from the Anakin in the movies. I'm not seeing that as a bad thing. Okay, he seemed a little bit more like how I'd picture Anakin, though still not quite there. You know, they were trying not to stray too far from the movie version, which I think is a mistake, frankly. I did not like their Anakin. I really didn't. And I won't even get into this whole Clone Wars mess. Oh my god. Wow. Yeah. But anyway, that's my take on the Star Wars movies that I know you guys have all been waiting for. So, hope you enjoyed it. See ya.